And what's happening, everyone? Welcome on into the Check Your Brain podcast. My name is Tony Mazur. Good to have you here. And yeah, if you are listening on the free podcast platforms or podcatchers, I've been using that one a lot lately. It is Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And again, wherever you get your finer podcasts, go check it out there. That's my podcast or the latest episodes there. So go through them and I talk about anything and everything. But it's not about me today. We're going to talk about somebody else. And he is coming to my neck of the woods this week, the Funny Stop Comedy Club, my home comedy club there, February 21st and 22nd. It's Claude Stuart. He is joining me on the podcast. If you're not in the area of Claude Stewart performing, whether it's the Cuyahoga Falls or wherever you're listening to this or watching this podcast, you can go check out his Dry Bar special, which is really good there. A lot of views, a lot of very good responses from that. So go check him out. And yes, Claude is my guest here. Welcome to the podcast, Claude.
Tony, thank you, buddy. I know I look a little different. My hair is down. I'm unshaven. I've got glasses. I look more like my agent than me right now.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because you're the guy who's known for being the where with the showing the high hair and everything like that, and it's interesting because I'm going to show this picture because I got a picture with you. We worked a weekend together back in 2016, so we both look very different there.
Oh, yeah. That's you, me, and Tyler.
Yeah, and then Tyler Ross, yes. And Tyler's been doing a lot of stuff on the road as well. But yeah, it was really cool. And we're like, yeah, we'll do a weekend with Claude, and it was a lot of fun. And I can't believe it's been 9 years. So I gotta see him more often. How about once every 9 years? So I'll get back to you.
Not
I'll get
quite
back
a
to you
decade.
in 2034.
Yeah, that sounds good. Who knows how we be communicating at that point? Probably a hologram. We'll just be floating above each other's bed.
Yeah, exactly. So you did that Dry Bar special, and I watched it. It's really good. You talk about ADHD and everything, and on my podcast, I get silly, but then we can get into serious topics and everything. But it's interesting about mentioning ADHD nowadays and being funny about it because it is something truthful. It is something that you pull from experience. How are you able to make jokes about something like that and have it be so relatable to people who are either dealing with that personally or have that in their family?
Well, I think first of all, if you have a disorder or a disability or learning disability, whatever it is, if you have it and state it up front, people are going to feel more comfortable laughing about it than if you didn't. Because you're not coming across as pointing to, oh, look at this idiot. Like, hey, look, I'm afflicted with this. I have this, and let me tell you about it. Then people are more at ease. So I think number one, I think that's an easy thing. And number two, I think even if someone doesn't have ADD or ADHD, they have seen it or know someone who's had it. And so I think it's just so prevalent throughout the world that people can relate to it. But it's funny, Tony, man, I remember when I've been doing comedy, gosh, I'm old, for a while, but when I started, like when I was a kid, I remember I started in Texas, and I remember one specifically, this comedian, he goes, or no, she was a lady, she goes, I don't believe in ADD. In fact, ADD, man, we would just get our asses beat. In fact, ADD, you know what it stands for? Another damn dumbass. Like that was...
It's funny, though.
It is funny, and it almost sounds like something Chris Rock would say. Another damn dumbass. Yeah, the whole catchphrase. But honestly, man, when she said that bit, I think a lot of people agreed with it, because they didn't know. And I think now we've seen it a lot more. We've seen it in our kids and other people's kids, and
the stigma has kind of gone away, and especially, let's be honest, if you're a stand-up comedian, you have something a little bit off with you.
You're not normal. We didn't get yeah, none of us got into this job because we just fell in line and did what we were told, so.
Well, so you're from Texas, and it's interesting nowadays when you see comedy, and everybody I talk to, some people who are kind of adjacent to comedy or comedy fans, and they go, boy, it must be really tough doing comedy nowadays with political correctness. I'm thinking, no, not really. Not if you're somebody who is a joke teller. And you're
Yeah,
somebody who from being from Texas, and just down the street there in Houston, you had the Texas Outlaws back in the day, the Bill Hicks, you had Sam Kinison and Carl LeBove and Jimmy Pineapple and all those other
oh
guys.
yeah.
There was something must have been in the water down there that you were able to absorb while swimming, right?
No, it's funny you bring them up because I've worked with Jimmy. I knew Carl, R.I.P. And I never had.
Andy Huggins, another one.
Yeah, yeah, and Andy, yeah, he was. He used to do a bit about he was tired of the dating game, so he's like, hey man, I just thought about being gay. I mean, not the lifestyle, just parade once a month. I can handle that, but but yeah, man, there was something out there, and I think they all challenged each other. You mentioned Kinnison and Hicks. I mean, they're often thought of as two of the best comedians ever. They were saying things that had never been said before. They had a certain style that had never been said, and you could even argue that Kinnison even influenced George Carlin because in the '90s, Carlin started raising his volumes. He started yelling some punchlines, and he had never done that, prior to Kinnison. Could be a coincidence, but it's an interesting argument,
Well, it's funny you mentioned that about Carlin because I'm so fascinated by the career arc of George Carlin, not just where he was the clean-cut comic, the hippy-dippy weatherman in the 60s to the pot smoking, seven dirty words in the 70s,
Yeah.
but by the 80s, Rick Moranis did him on SCTV doing George Carlin, and Kelly Carlin, his daughter, mentioned how he saw Rick Moranis parodying him. You thought George Carlin was above parody. Oh no! And where he's talking about beats, about the word beats, 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 and he's like, I gotta change now. Something's got, and it must have been Bill Hicks, yeah, just lit a fire under him that he really became that really dark, angry guy by the '90s and early 2000s.
Well, that's a great point, Tony, and it's interesting because he did get dark, he did get angry, still funny, still brilliant. But I would say after he lost his wife, I think he had one special. It was very bitter. I thought he had lost that goofiness. However, the last special he did, I want to say 2008. That was the final one he did. It was up in maybe Santa Rosa, California, a theater they did, but it was the HBO special. He got the goofiness back, and I thought it was a perfect mix of that dark, angry guy and the lightheartedness.
Oh yeah, You Are All Diseased. I think came out in 1999, and the first 20 minutes of that are rapid fire, and no one is safe.
Yeah,
And it's one of those where if you're a non-com, because my parents went to go see George Carlin in those days, and what he would do is he would have his notebook on stage, and he would go through jokes for his yearly HBO specials.
yeah,
And I think my parents even mentioned they walked out and they saw other people walking out because he was just angry about everything. So
yeah.
I went to go back and watch it, and I'm like, okay, as a comedian, I see what he's going for. It's not for everybody. It's
No,
definitely different from somebody who grew up with George Carlin again in the 60s and the 70s with AM, FM, and all that.
yeah.
But it is still really funny.
Well, you know what he does too, and this is a very smart thing to do. If you got to do a new hour, he'll go, all right. This next is just a random list of people I could do without. And it's basically like it's a good way to kill 10 minutes because you're doing material, but it's a list where you're naming things you don't like. But some of them were like, why do you hate that? He'll be like, people I could do without. Left-handed guys named Todd. Like what? What is your issue with left-handed Todds?
Guys who wear visors. Why are you buying half a hat?
Totally. So, yeah, that part is kind of strange. But Tony, you mentioned you're like a lot of people do say, yeah, it must be hard doing comedy. And look, it always evolves, it always changes. But I did have an Uber driver said to me, we started talking. And he's like, man, what's it like doing comedy these days as a straight white guy? I was like, why don't you try being a skinny, middle-aged straight white guy? There's 5 reasons to hate me right off the bat, But I don't know. To me, there's a way to turn that into an asset. I think there's a lot of straight white dudes who don't want to mention it. I think there's a lot of straight white dudes who, in my opinion, this is a mistake, who like apologize for it. Sorry, I'm one of those. It's like, well, what are you apologizing for? Like, would you ask anyone else of a different race or gender or sexuality to apologize for them? No, you wouldn't. So just be you and be funny. Does that make sense?
And because you're not fat, you can't like lean on the obvious jokes. So you're like, oh, I guess I have to write material.
No, totally. Yeah.
So, well, so but I was saying about how nowadays with everything so politically charged, and it's interesting how people perceive that as like, oh, that's got to be tough because everyone's going to be offended. And going back, this has always been the case of you're going to have, sure, you're going to have an offended audience member, but that's part of the game. That's part of what you have to do. You have to go in knowing that it could be hostile territory. You got to know your audience. You got to know your craft. You got to go on stage and realize, look, any other night, it can be something. I could have a great crowd. I could have a crowd that's not with me. And
Well,
there's an author and a podcaster, Michael Malice, has talked about when he used to do stand up for only 6 months, and he said that the weirdest, you know, thing to do when you're doing comedy is you're doing the same material each night, yet it gets a different response every night. And he's like, I couldn't handle that. I'm doing the same jokes, and it kills one night, and the next night I'm getting booed. I don't understand. And
I
it's
mean,
like
look,
obviously there's different nuances to it.
it's true, but I mean, look, if I'm doing a cruise ship, it's a family friendly show. You know, I mean, if I'm doing a church, or if I'm doing something, you know, that's a 9-year-old couple is renewing their vows and it's, you know, 4 p.m. Yes, I'm gonna go clean. I know the limitations, but if I'm in a nightclub, I'm gonna do what I want to do, and I don't know, man. I just never, before I did comedy, I never watched comedy and said, I'm offended. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, wow. I can't believe they did that. I may think something's not funny. I think it may be more gross or like someone's trying too hard. But I just, me personally, I never got offended and yelled at the comedian. Like, that makes no sense to me.
Well, that's why I mentioned those Texas Outlaws from you being from Texas, because they were the kind of people that it didn't matter if they walked the crowd. Sam Kinison could start screaming at women in the front row. The comics in the back are laughing their ass off. They're
Yeah.
falling on the ground.
Yeah.
Bill Hicks. It's funny how the revering of Bill Hicks or people like Patrice O'Neill. I never met Bill. Bill died when I was like 6 years old, but I did meet Patrice. I've seen him a couple of times, and the revisionist history of like, oh, one of the greats of all time. There were people who walked out of these shows and were very upset with what they were saying on stage. Yet they would always get work because you did have talent bookers and you had comedy club owners who were like, no, some people don't understand how funny and how brilliant this person is. I'm still going to book them even if they walk half the crowd.
Yeah, and they're saying some things that need to be said. You know, I think that was a big thing too. I mean, people, you may not like what they said, but you thought about it a week later. You know, so that's resonating. That's really doing something. You know, I one night I saw Dice Clay at the Comedy Store. Now again, he's not. You know, he's a different animal than Bill Hicks, but he did. He said to the audience, "I appreciate this." He goes, "Here's the deal. Half of you gonna love me, half you gonna hate me. But guess what? Either way, I'm the only one you're gonna talk about on the way home." And he's not wrong. You know?
Dice is one of the most interesting comics of all time because obviously, you know, there was the Nora Dunn situation on SNL and he was
Oh yeah,
banned from MTV and everything, but
boycotted. Yeah,
he had one of the greatest things he said about advice for a comic. He said, when you're up on stage, that's your stage. Own the stage. Don't just stand there with the microphone and go and tell your jokes. Use the stage. Use every inch of that stage and make it your own. And I thought about that after I heard him say that and going,
yeah,
he's right. He's right. This is from Dice, who was an actor. Dice, who was in episodes of MASH and a couple, and of course, and then eventually Ford Fairlane. But
hmm
he was an actor first,
yeah,
and he really wanted to be. So you realize you have to chew up a lot of that scenery there, and it's great advice for a lot of comics who just want to go up there and thinking it's 1986 at a Tony Roma's with a brick wall behind you and going like, hey, did you hear the one about this guy?
yeah, yeah. There's right behind him. There's a cat with a microphone or something, and in the backdrop. Yeah, but that's true. There's nothing wrong with using the entire stage. And look, you're talking to I'm a physical comic. You know, I like to use whatever's in front of me. So I
And
think
that's why I was mentioning it, because I've seen you do stand up a bunch of times, and you're that kind of guy who you use up the stage. You are the one who you go up there, and when you are delivering your material, you're not just talking, you're delivering it to the audience members, almost like you're sitting in their lap, basically.
right, right. It's true, and sometimes I do sit in their laps. It depends. Uh, but but yeah, man. I mean, if you're talking about advice, this is interesting. Louis C.K. I opened for him. Oh gosh, 20 years ago, in Kansas City, and at the time I was in an interracial relationship, and I'd written some jokes about it, but I was scared to do certain angles. And he goes, "All I can tell you is this: anything that makes you inherently uncomfortable, that's exactly what you should talk about." And I go, okay, cool. And man, to his credit, I started writing, and I had this whole act about like a younger white guy from Mississippi, originally dating an older black woman with a teenage son. And I wrote a sitcom about it, and it was some of the best jokes that I had written, And anyway, I ran into him later. They have like the SAG Awards, and I was randomly chosen to be on the SAG like voting committee. And so I go and I see, this is when Louis was on the air, right? And he was promoting like the new season of Louis, and he's up there and he was doing a Q&A. And I got on there, I was like, "Hey, Louis," I reminded him of that story. And I was like, "I had the pleasure of opening for you, and that's what you told me. And like, my question is, why?" And he started laughing. He's like, "I'm laughing because you probably wanted to follow up with a why, but I'd already walked away." And I'm like, "Yes, that's exactly what happened." And he goes, "Well, this is what I mean is like, there's two types of laughter in comedy. There's the Seinfeld laugh, like, haha, yes, I relate to that, right? And then there's the other laugh, which is, why am I laughing at this? Oh my God." And he's like, "That's what I go for." It's like, just to me, that's more interesting. Nothing against Jerry. He's like, Jerry's awesome. He's brilliant at what he does. It's just, to me, that's just my style. So that he clarified it for me, like, 10 years later, which is cool.
That is great advice. And you, I'm sure you get a lot of people asking you for advice and getting into comedy. And obviously, the means of distribution have changed over time. And that in the time that you started doing stand up, there was a time where you wanted to go on the Tonight Show, and you wanted to go on the Letterman and all these other. You wanted your own premium blend, or go on premium blend. You wanted your Comedy Central Presents and your HBO.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what advice you could tell a young stand up. Start a TikTok, put your material on YouTube or Instagram. Like, I don't know. This is why I'm living in Cleveland, Ohio, and not out in Los
Ah,
Angeles.
well, I would say yes, get it out there, but don't do it before it's ready. I've seen a lot of people make the mistake of they're not ready yet. Look, it's one thing you do a character, you put a pink wig on, you're break dancing at a nunnery. Okay, fine. That's like a sketch. Okay, that's funny. You can get booked off that, I suppose. But I mean, if you're talking about material, I would not put the material on social media in the world until it's ready.
Yeah, and the other one is the special. That at one time they were special, and unless you're Bill Burr, unless you're the aforementioned George Carlin, I was noticing comics. There was a stretch in the aughts and the 2010s that it seemed like every comic was putting out two specials a year, and I'm thinking, then they're not as special anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about two a year. Maybe, I mean, maybe some were. It's funny. Someone said that to me about Bill Burr. I'm like, no, he doesn't. He does it. Burr does it like every 2 years. But still, I mean, we both know how hard it is to come up with a new hour. It's extremely difficult. But yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. It's kind of like if all these specials are coming out, does it dilute the concept of a special? I don't know. I mean, I do know that if I put something out and say it's a special, I mean, I believe in it. I worked really hard at it. And as soon as it's out, now I got to move on to the other one. So hopefully I did my job in this one. I mean, I would hope that most comedians have that attitude of like, hey, man, I worked my ass off. This is something I believe in. Here it is. Enjoy or hate. Either one. If you talk about it, it's going to get it more press. So, and that's what haters don't understand. All they're doing is making it better. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
like the more comments, the more arguing you get. That's fine. People are talking about it. So, it kind of goes back to, remember Cat Williams had the theories of ladies, you got 20 women hating on you. Your goal should be 20 more by the summer. You know,
And also the other thing is the destination, the location. That yeah, I remember about maybe a year ago, I had Nathan Timmel on the podcast, another
yeah.
comic, and he's another guy who's from the Midwest, moved out to Los Angeles. He did it a little bit, and realized, yeah, maybe it's LA's not for me, or maybe I'll go somewhere else and go to Chicago or something. But there was that one time where it's the 60s, it's the 70s. Johnny Carson's moving from New York to Burbank, and you
Mhm.
want to get discovered by Jim McCawley at from the Comedy Store in the back of the room to go on the Tonight Show, and you want to be discovered. And then if you weren't out there, you're still, at Catch a Rising Star in New York or the Boston Comedy Club and other places. And there was always that goal that I want to get discovered. I want to get past at the Comedy Cellar. I want to go to the Comedy Store. I want to go to the Improv, all these other things.
Mhm.
And I mean, I don't know if it was COVID. I don't know what was going on, but it doesn't seem like that focus has been there. I mean, unless I'm wrong, unless I'm out this far out of the scene, it just seemed like now Austin has become kind of a new comedy hub with the Mothership and Joe Rogan. It is the goal, if you're a young comic that you're starting to get some gigs, you're going on the road a little bit, is the goal still to do Los Angeles, to do New York, to do Chicago, or can you still make it big in being in whatever USA?
Well, it just depends on what your end game is. You mentioned Nathan Temple. I like Nathan. He's a funny guy, man. But I think Nathan came out here. I don't want to speak for him, but I just from working with him and knowing him, I don't think he ultimately wanted to be an actor. And a lot of comedians, encounter that. They come out here. Okay, cool. I'm out here. I'm auditioning. I'm doing that. Wait, I don't want to be an actor. I don't want to dress up in a chicken suit for this commercial. You know what I mean? I just want to tell jokes. I don't want, and that's okay. Some people were actors first. Some people always did both. I mean, I always kind of did both. I certainly of doing more comedy now. That's my focus now. That and writing. But I'll tell you this. As a writer, Zoom has been a huge game changer. You don't have to be in LA and New York anymore. You can be anywhere. Look at us. You're in Ohio. I'm right outside Beverly Hills, and we're doing our thing. So that's, I mean, I wrote on a TV show. We went on hiatus, which seems to be probably permanent last May, but I did 7 seasons, and then once COVID started, we went Zoom, and we actually had a writer from Ohio, all over. So as a writer, you don't need to, as a comedian, it just depends on your end game. I mean, if you just want to tour and you want to do bigger and better venues, just you can be wherever. Just keep working on. You have to keep touring. You have to keep building your email list and your fan base and your social, and then hopefully you can get into those bigger venues. But if you want to be an actor, I do think LA and New York are still the best places to be right now. I don't think, again, I'm originally from Mississippi. I don't think that's, there's going to be any auditions that are going to help you there so much. But yeah, LA and New York. I mean, what I'm saying is this. I work with a production company. It's myself and 3 partners. If I want to attach, I don't know, Nikki Glazier or Craig Robinson, let's just say like a big comedian, if I want to attach them to a script, it's a 10-minute drive away where I am right now. If I go to Austin, it's not. However, Joe Rogan knows everybody. He has big people come through all the time, and there's a great community out there. But if I go to a small town in the middle of nowhere, that there's not that. So it just depends on what you ultimately want to do. Did I answer the question?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Because I think it's fascinating how these means of distribution, how things have changed so dramatically in that time, and especially with you coming up in the '90s and in the 2000s, that there was still that focus of being on the late night show and getting the special, and even before that, the development deal. That was the huge thing
Oh yeah,
of you.
yeah,
You got discovered at the Comedy Store, and Roseanne gets a deal, and Tim Allen gets a deal, Drew Carey gets a deal, Jerry Seinfeld gets a deal, all the way to the point where like Jim Brewer, Dave Chappelle were getting it by the mid '90s.
right.
And that was always that goal, because then you're in this waiting period. You get like 750 grand to kind of hang out and get some strict script together, and that has all kind of changed. The sitcom has also changed a lot too. And you were somebody who were on that '70s show. You were on a couple of other shows, and It's just interesting how you just got to keep up with whatever like I said, that means of distribution, whatever is going on. You got to continue adapting to whatever the medium is.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's I was talking with some other comedians about this before, and that used to be the thing. It was, you mentioned Johnny Carson. It was like, oh man, if I do the Tonight Show, boom, I'm in. Uh, one credit. One good Comedy Central could lead to a Comedy Central special, and that was like the drive. And then it's changed, and now it's more streamers. But I mean, I have a dry bar special. I have one on Tubi, and you know the deal I made with them when I did them, it's not like that money, set me for the year or whatever, but they both have made a lot of money since. Like, they both have got me a lot of work. So again, you just got to think long run. What do I want to do out of this? Well, I mean, you want good footage, you want to get it out there, you want something that can properly promote and advertise you, and something that could, get you more gigs and make you money over a long period of time. So, um,
I got to ask, how was it working on that '70s show?
oh, it was cool, man. I had like two roles. One was I was the sarcastic waiter that was always trying to hit on Fez's date, you know. And so like I would always be, hey, how you doing? And he'd be like, back off, she's mine, right? And then the other one, my hair was long. I was a hippie. And do you remember when Red kept showing up at Hyde's record shop?
Oh, yes, yes, of course.
Okay, so I was the hippie that he called Hophead. He would be like, out of my way, Hophead. I'm like, whatever, dude. So it was pretty cool, man. It was Topher Grace is awesome. I think he's very underrated. When I say underrated, I just think he should be talked about more with his acting. I think I don't know if you ever seen him in a drama, but he nails it. I don't know if you saw Black Klansman. He played David Duke, and he was hilarious in it, which is a movie you wouldn't think would be funny, but he makes it very funny. But Ashton Kutcher is very nice. He's actually, strangely, he's kind of shy. You wouldn't think that he would be. Zach Braff is like that too. I had like a recurring on Scrubs, and he started directing, toward the end, and he's very shy.
Yeah, those unassuming, very A-list guys that it's funny because as you've been out in California for all these years, that you would think that the A-listers are the ones who blow you off, but they're actually some of the nicest people. It's usually
Yeah,
everybody else that's trying to compete for the top. Those are the ones who screw you over.
yeah, it's interesting. It's like somebody like Vince Vaughn. He's exactly what you think he would be. He's exactly on screen and off screen, and he's great, man. I'll tell you, first time I met him, so he's a huge fan of comedy. I'm sure you heard about remember that movie? It was like 2005, '06 with Sebastian.
Oh, the
Uh,
Wild West of comedy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. My friend Brett Ernst was one of them.
Yeah, I know Brett. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So he
Brett used to live down the street from me, so his brief stay in Ohio.
oh, right on, right
He,
on.
he moved there and realized that a guy from New York who lived in Miami and Los Angeles for a while, I don't know, Fair Lawn, Ohio, just really didn't. I remember he would call, he would text me. It's like, hey, where are we going tonight? Like, what's the scene? What's going on? I said, Brett, it's a Tuesday in the suburbs. Everything closes. I mean, we can go to Applebee's, but I think last call is about 9:45.
Yeah, yeah. So let's go order three and hope for the best. Get kicked out. Yeah, I'll tell you very well. Before I get to Vince, I'll tell you a very quick funny story about Brett. Do you know Dwayne Perkins?
I I know the name. Yeah.
He had a Netflix special. He wrote with me on the same TV show, Funny You Should Ask. And so he was telling me, he goes, man, one night this girl came to see me, and I did a show with Brett. And hey, Brett, I introduced her. And like literally the very next night, he's like, I was hanging out with another girl at a comedy club, and there was Brett. I go, hey, Brett, and I pulled him aside. I go, hey, man, I know you saw me with that other girl last night, but it's cool, blah blah blah. And Brett goes, dude, enough. Never apologize for being a man. I told Brett, he's like, I don't even remember that. I'm like, I know.
That's who he is. That's the beauty of him. He's still working hard over. I think he's in Vegas right now.
Yeah, he's got two residencies. He and Butch Bradley have two different residencies. Why am I plugging my friends' careers? Anyway, but no, they're both at Jimmy Kimmel and they're at the Strat, I think, LA Comedy Club. But anyway, Vince saw me one night at Dublin's. I don't know if you ever heard comedians talk about Dublin's. It was like
Mhm.
this Irish bar that was it was basically a comedy club above Irish bar on Sunset. It was like the thing to do on Tuesday night. It's honestly what made Dane Cook's career. They would have him close out the show, and that's how he really got a huge following, or partially at least. Anyway, so Vince saw me. I was showcasing for some late night show. The guy was cool. We talked anyway, but I didn't have the set that I wanted. You know how you have a good enough set, but you don't have that set that you wanted, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I should have gone up earlier. He asked me, and I said, no, go on a little later. I thought the crowd was going to be even hotter. But by the way, are you salivating over your shoulder? What is happening? You keep turning.
Oh, I'm sweating, and
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like, I'm getting sweat beads dripping down into my near my ass crack, and I'm just like, oh boy, what's going on here?
I wanted to help out the viewers. Thank God you said. I thought you were going to be like, look, I have a condition, I have a spinal injury, and I have Tourette's. Like, all right, I'm an asshole.
I should have used that. I need new material.
You got it for next time, no problem. So basically, I get off stage, and I saw Vince looking at me when I was performing, and he was talking to someone. Then he looks at me and I go, hey, how you doing? And I just know he's like a film buff, so he would get this reference. I go, I saw you staring at me like Vincent D'Onofrio from Full Metal Jacket right before he offed the sergeant, right? And he goes, nice. He goes, no. It's like, look, you got crazy energy. I was like absorbing you. I was taking it in. And I was talking, and I basically told him, I go, yeah, man, I just didn't have the set I wanted. I mean, I thought it was good and consistent, but I wanted to knock it out of the park. He's like, no, look, man, comedy's like acting, baby. You don't apologize. You just don't hesitate. You fucking do it. You go in there, you do it. They don't like it. They don't like it. Come here, you're beautiful. And he gives me a hug, right? Very nice. And as he's talking to me, 3 women walk up behind him. You could tell they're trying to talk to him. And he kind of sees them in the reflection. He goes, hold on, excuse me. Sorry, ladies, not going to happen tonight. Anyway, right? Just does
that's
that,
fantastic.
which is hilarious. And then, of course, last call at the end of the night, who's he hanging out with? Those 3 chicks doing shots. So he's exactly like you would think he would be. You know?
Oh, that's great. That's excellent. Yeah, those clubs where you mentioned about Dane Cook, because again, you want to talk about the changing of the guard of him putting stuff on MySpace and
Oh, yeah.
all of that. But those clubs, because again, when you mentioned the main clubs in Los Angeles, the Laugh Factory, the Improv, and the Comedy Store, but then there's so many others. There's Haha Cafes still there. Are they still doing the $5 open mic thing?
I don't know if I'm sure they are. I don't know about the open mic. I mean, there's the Comedy Chateau is like right down the street from the Haha, the Ice House in Pasadena.
Yep.
That's
they redid that just before COVID. I was there when they were changing things out there back in 2019, and yeah, it's interesting when you think about that scene and everybody going out there and wanting to do some stuff, but it's the LA comedy scene was always like, is there still that stigma of the difference between the New York scene and the LA scene? The LA, they're like, oh yeah, you had a great set, but it was passive aggressive, or is that was that just like a little bit of a myth?
No. I would say that there's a lot of truth to that. The New York comic talking to you after, like, dude, that sucked. The LA, great set. And then they walk off. Yeah. Yeah, I would say that there is that. But wouldn't you say, though, Tony, there's a certain code with comedians, like if you say, hey, sorry, man, I missed your set. That means you sucked. Right?
I was hanging out in the bar. Oh, sorry, someone was talking.
Yeah,
but I didn't get a chance to hear you. But I'm sure you did great.
Yeah,
the crowd loves you.
Somebody says like, ooh, tough crowd. That means, you sucked. I'm just pretending to be sympathetic. Right?
Like, yeah, I heard that joke. Like, I have a tag for you. No, free of charge.
Yeah. Here's some unsolicited advice,
Yeah, whatever you did, don't do that. I'm gonna ask the hack question here of like anybody, like when you would be on a morning radio show, but I don't want to say who your influences were, but when you started out in comedy, as every comedian does, you're not you at the beginning. I heard Bonnie McFarlane talk about this, that it takes at least a decade to find your voice, because at the beginning, you're influenced by what it could be. A comedian, it could be, I don't know, the Marx Brothers or something, or the Three Stooges or Looney Tunes or something. You're influenced by something until you eventually find your voice. So who did you meet at the beginning? Who did you try to emulate until you found Claude Stuart?
That is a great question. And Bonnie's got a great point. And she's echoing, I mean, I don't know if she's heard him say this or not, but Bill Maher essentially said the same thing. He goes, I feel sorry for comedians who quit at 10 years because that's when they just start to get really good. You know, so who did I? Okay, so when I started comedy, it was in the '90s, and the three funniest people on TV, at least to people my age, a kid and a college kid, were Chris Farley, Jim Carrey, and Kramer from Seinfeld. Those were like the three that every college dude was talking about. So obviously those guys are high energy and crazy and physical. Now that, to my credit, not credit, but I mean in my defense here, that was always like my style. That's like me at a party. I'm always the guy kicking above his head and dancing and jumping around. Like that's just always been me. I always emulated rock stars like David Lee Roth. I thought that their moves were cool. But yeah, man, I would say they definitely influenced me. I was always a huge Dennis Miller fan. He was my favorite anchor on SNL. I just liked his. I loved his writing, and I love how he would kind of make up his own words. Sometimes, and he was very specific. He's a wordsmith. He's specific with his punchline. Now, I had the pleasure. My first job in TV. I moved out to LA. I randomly met one of Dennis Miller's writers, and then they called me and go, "Hey, we need like an intern on Friday. It's paid. Can you do it on Fridays, the day of the shoot?" Hell yeah! And I got paid. Here I am, young guy.
Was that on his talk show?
It was the HBO show. Yeah. Yeah, because he had one on Fox that was short-lived, and then he had
a brief, it was syndicated when he left SNL, and then he eventually came back in the mid-'90s with the HBO show, which it was on for a long time.
It was like 94 to 01, something like that, But
and then he went on Monday Night Football, which, by the way, I've gone thankfully because of YouTube, I've gone and watched some of those old Monday Night Football games of Dennis Miller on there, and every TV guide at the time said this is the biggest disaster in television, and I started listening going, it's actually really funny. Not only is he funny, he knows the game. He was from Pittsburgh. He grew up with the Steel Curtain Steelers back in the day. He knew the game way better than I think a lot of people thought. Wasn't bad, gotta say.
No,
I thought Tony Kornheiser was much worse than Dennis Miller.
Oh my God, no, he's a football fanatic. He's just way too smart for the room. I mean, I'll give you an example. What did he say one time? Oh yeah. One time there was a quarterback sack, and I swear to God, Tony, he goes, Christ, I haven't seen that much bloodshed since the House of Plantagenets. And it's what the fuck? And you got to Google that, man. That's like 13th century. I think that's like, Scotland versus England in a bloody battle that, I mean, but
that's the best thing I've heard on a like the smartest thing I've heard on a sports broadcast since Howard Cosell was corrected by Bob Uecker in a broadcast, and I guess Howard Cosell said, "Thank you, Bob. I didn't think you had to be so truculent. I bet you don't even know what truculent means." And Bob Uecker, without missing a beat, says, "Oh well, yeah. If I rented a truck from you, it would be a truculent."
That's classic Bob, baby. That's awesome. But yeah, man, I got to watch him write, and it was great. Like the writers would come up with like the rant and monologue jokes. They'd pitch it to him, and he would go, "Okay, we're almost there. Let's do this." And he would replace like one verb and improve the joke 10 times. So it was really cool to watch him do that. And by the way, he never called me Claude. He either called me Blondie, or keep in mind this. I know my hair's like that, but when my hair's down and shaggy, it's kind of like in a David Spade, do. And it was very preppy, very blonde. I was probably 20 more pounds of muscle. And you know what he called me? He would call me Billy Zabka from Cobra Kid. In Cobra Kai, he'd be like, "Hey Zabka, you kicking any macho ass today, babe?" Like.
A lot of people don't realize what a cultural moment it was in the 90s or late 80s, early 90s with Dennis Miller, how big he was.
Oh, yeah. No, he was, I mean, remember his last name was Miller, so he started doing those Miller Lite commercials. And remember that campaign, he would walk out, he'd look at the Miller sign and go, "I just knew they'd come."
And then Dana Carvey doing the Dennis Miller next to Dennis Miller on SNL was fantastic.
Yeah. No, that was awesome.
So I got to ask about the hair, because I showed it earlier. Your hair, I mean, it looks like you stuck a fork in an electrical socket. Where did that come from? Why is that still going on?
Okay, so that all started because I used to have my hair. I got it kind of gelled now, but I used to have it just kind of shaggy, just kind of hanging like that, and it would get in my eyes a little bit. And I'd watch myself on video, and I would either be running my hands through it, or I go, I kind of blow it out of the way, and I'd watch it go, God, I'm annoying myself. So then I thought, oh, easy solution. I get gel, put it in there, bam, sticks up, problem solved. That's how I started it. And then I'd look at it and be like, oh, well, this is good for my persona because it's like a rock star cartoon, you know? So I just
Well,
thought,
it's kind of Kramer. Like you mentioned
yeah,
that you would watch Kramer at the beginning. If you
yeah,
watch that first season, especially the pilot episode of the Seinfeld Chronicles,
yeah,
his hair is like, okay, it's a little up. And then as the show continued, it started going up and up where it was touching the ceiling, basically.
yes, absolutely. So yeah, yeah, he became like Bella the Clown, you know? Uh, but yeah, that's how it. But I think it fits the persona more because I a fusion of like a cartoon rock star, if you will. So
My favorite thing when I've dated, now I'm married now, but when I was dating girls, it would be the charm of being a comic or a funny guy, and then it doesn't turn off, and the
right,
charm goes away. It's like, do you never shut up? They're like, why are you performing for me all the time? I'm like, this is just who I am. I'm sorry, that's what it is. But at
right.
least having the gel up there shows that that is Claude Stuart, the character. And then when your meet and greet and stuff, and then you eventually comb the gel out, I would assume that's when you start coming out of character and becoming a normal person again.
Yeah, I mean, I have an off switch, you know. I mean, I wouldn't want to hang out with me all the time if that was me every second of the day, you know. But for the stage, it's completely appropriate. So yeah, I mean, and Tony, I'm sure you've met comedians that do not have an off switch, and my God, it's annoying. You know, after a while, you're like, who are you doing this for, buddy? You know, we're just having a conversation.
Yeah, some comics will do that. It is a character, and it's almost like when you meet them off stage, you're like, well, I was expecting the character all the time, because I think sometimes it's the opposite when they do come out of character. And I knew this from working in radio for a long time, is that you would meet that the big personality in such and such town,
Yeah,
and after they get done with their coffee and it's 10 o'clock and it's time to go, it's like, I gotta come out of the character that I was in. I was this wacky, crazy guy in the morning with this fake voice,
right,
and now
right.
I dropped the stage name, and I'm normal guy who pays my taxes, and I have to I gotta make sure I pick up the dog from the groomers in a little bit, and then I'll be home. So
Right.
it is interesting when you see the balancing of characters, but it's not a fake personality. It's just it's a I don't know. You're pepping yourself up just a little bit.
Well, no, like I said, that's me at a party. You know, it's not 100% me, but that's certainly a version of me, and it's certainly an enhanced personality. That's who you're going to meet when when if you're hanging out with me watching a concert. You know, and let's be honest, live comedy, that is a concert. People are paying money to come see your performance. So, you know,
Well, you said about David Lee Roth and about really chewing up the stage and him doing the air jump and the leg kick up above there, and
yeah,
it is interesting when you think about entertainment in general that you give people a show. Well, what does a show mean? I mean, it could be anything. You can be the band America who does Sister Golden Hair, and it's
right.
just a bunch of guys in their mid 70s playing acoustic guitars, or you can be the Rolling Stones. And I saw the Stones last year. Mick Jagger's in his 80s, and he's still dancing. He's still doing everything. So it's like you're giving people a little bit more for that. So it's the physical comedy, the physical, along with the music and everything, the material you bring it's always a plus, I think, nowadays.
No, thank you. That's cool to hear you say that, and it's true. I mean, I think I saw a meme that it had Mitch McConnell and Mick Jagger, and they're essentially the same age, and then it's clearly sex jokes, sex and drugs and rock and roll have benefits. My God, you know, but yeah, man, I just think it depends on your style. Look, Mitch Hedberg is one of the greatest writers ever. You could throw a bottle at his head, he wouldn't acknowledge it. He would keep going. That's okay. That's his style, you know. But like somebody yells at Kinnison, somebody yells at me, I'm gonna, I'm gonna go back. But my style is to use the whole stage, and that's just me. I mean, I'm probably too old to be doing that joke where I do a backflip, but sometimes I do it anyway. So it's
Yeah, just don't pop pills like Jerry Lewis did, where he was he was on so many pills and steroids by the end because he just did too many pratfalls.
oh, I know, my God, yeah, he kind of had an Elvis thing going toward the end, you know.
Chevy Chase, all them. But yeah, it's well, and the difference, of course, with rock stars and comedians is that if Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones don't do Satisfaction tonight, you're throwing bottles at the stage. But if
Yeah,
a comedian does the same joke you heard him last time you saw, it's like, heard that one. Next, I need another joke. Come on, I already heard that joke.
it's so stupid. I mean, so you do get requests, from some diehard fans, but yeah, people don't. They don't realize that, and a lot of people think you just go out there and talk, and that's not really the deal. Sure, you can go off things that happen, but they call it a routine for a reason.
Yeah, the process of jokes, because mentioned about Jerry Seinfeld, is that I saw Jerry in 2009, and if I saw Jerry tomorrow, if he were in my neck of the woods, probably would be the same show. Not a bad thing. That's just the old school style was you have a joke and you craft it and you craft it and you craft it until it's perfect. And then
Yeah,
when you think it's perfect, it's still imperfect and you got to keep crafting and crafting it. While others, they put it on a special and that's it. It's retired. I'm tearing it up. I'm never going on stage with that joke again. More comics nowadays because we've gotten away from more of the golden age of Hollywood and the golden age of comedy, where, every comic. It seemed like every comedy troupe 100 years ago did the Niagara Falls Slowly I Turn bit or Who's on First.
uh-huh.
Now it's if you're a comic going up on stage with someone else's material, that's a mortal sin.
Yeah. Well, I think it should be.
Oh yeah,
It's because you mentioned like the who's on first. I do think that the rules apply differently when it's like an improv group. You know what I mean? The rules seem to be different. But if you're like alone, naked, okay, up here, it's almost like you're admitting, look, I wrote this. This is my act. And then if you're word for word, stealing, then I don't think you should be up there doing that. It's
yeah.
always
It's always interesting. It's always fun to see how people kind of treat this and what everyone's process. Come on, right? So we're telling dick jokes. Let's be honest here.
I'm entertaining drunks. What do you want? Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Claude,
No,
hey, I appreciate you doing the podcast here.
yes, thank you for
You're
having me, Tony.
you're
Oh
you're
yeah.
in my neck of the woods, like I said, February 21st, 22nd at the Funny Stop Comedy Club. Go check out Claude if he is in your neck of the woods. I will. I'm trying to pull this up because I'm a moron and I didn't have this ready here. But
I
there it is,
believe in you, Tony.
ClaudeStewart.com. Go check him
Oh,
out. And all on tour. There's his hair.
yes, baby. I
That's
am.
the first thing what everyone sees. You got to see the hair because it's funny when you signed on with the Zoom for the interview and I see this man with you've got parted hair. You look very coiffed. It's like, wow, what happened to the guy there? That's a different person.
I know. I am my manager right now, but I thought I'd like tease the crowd. You want to see me live. You'll get that. I'm 5'11". I will be 6'4" on stage when you come see me. I promise. What I was going to tell you is that I'm plug a few quick things. Yes. So thank you for mentioning the website. I've got a dry bar special. I have one on Tubi, and I just released actually a bunch of tracks that are all over Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music. There's a if you actually I'm doing a thing now where people direct message me on any of my social media, whether it's TikTok, IG, Facebook, whatever. Message me, say you want my new special. I will give you my new special for the price of or I'm sorry, I'll give you 3 specials for the price of 1. That's what I'm doing.
Very nice.
Yeah, one's R-rated and crazy, one's PG-13, and one's totally family friendly. But yeah, I'm doing that. And then if you guys have Amazon Prime, I'm on a series on that. It's called Highland Parking. 3 words: High Land Parking. Check it out. A lot of fun.
You mentioned about having like an R-rated special. It was funny. We mentioned Sebastian earlier. I was at the
Yeah.
I forgot which. I think it was in the main room at the Comedy Store one day, and Sebastian was going up there. As you know, you look at the lineup at the Comedy Store, and usually it's like Mark Maron and Sebastian and a couple others at the beginning, and then eventually, the whole laundry list of people. Eventually, I think Brody Stevens was on that night.
Ah, God bless him.
You got it. uh, Enjoy it, but I saw Sebastian. And I'm like, I didn't really think two things about it. I've seen his specials, and it's very family friendly, very Italian, and he
Yeah.
was filthy that night, but
Really?
funny. And I'm
Wow.
like, whoa, where did this guy come from? I just hear about him talking about the sausage and the peppers, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like it's like it's like, aren't you embarrassed? And I'm going, this guy's really funny. Where's this guy been?
Well, where did he was he talking about like sex with his wife or like what was so dirty that he
He was well, there was a couple of F-bombs, and yeah, he was talking about, he might have been talking about anal but not with it. I think just in general, not with his wife. But
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, whoa, I didn't hear this. This is kind of interesting. So
Wow.
that's why you folks need to go see an actual comedy show. You can't just take everybody's word for it. So yeah, go watch Claude's special on YouTube and Tubi, and go check him out and everything. But if he is in your neck of the woods, there is nothing like a comedy show. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be around this weekend when you're here, but eventually we'll catch up and we'll have a good time. But I appreciate you coming on the podcast, and appreciate you coming back to the Funny Stop. We miss Pete. It's been 2 years now.
Yeah, I can't believe it, man. One of my favorite memories from Pete and his wife and I still laugh about this. You know how he would get up there right before the open mic and give a speech to all
Hmm.
the open micers. He's like, get up here, be clean. You only have a couple minutes. I want you to be clean. Don't get up here and say fuck, shit. You grab your balls. You get the fuck out.
Oh, it was so great of him doing those where, yeah, you had the amateur night, and it was 5 minutes and you had to be clean, and
Yeah,
he would curse the whole time. He would
I
cut your
know.
mic if you cursed on stage, but he could curse, and it was always funny. It's like, no to fucking cursing. We don't want any of that motherfucking shit. You don't take the fucking.
And
Okay,
then
sure.
while he was giving his speech, then his wife, the doll, would slowly turn the lights out on him.
He was the only club owner who would heckle the comics on stage,
I
and
know.
Pauly Shore would love it. Yeah, Gallagher did not like it, but
Oh yeah,
yeah, that's
I
Gallagher
can
didn't like a lot
imagine
of
that.
stuff.
One comic asked him one time, Pete, do you mind if I go, is this too far if I go to this town in Ohio to he's like, no, go ahead. You want to go out there and suck for the whole weekend? Be my guest.
We
I
miss
miss
we
Pete.
miss him, but we love the family and love the club. But yeah,
Yes.
February 21st, 22nd at the Funny Stop Comedy Club in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. For all things Claude Stewart, go to Claude Stewart, Stuart, not with an EW,
Thank you.
UART. Claude
Every
Stewart,
comedy club misspells it, so that's very nice of you.
of
Not that
course. Well,
this one did it real.
as someone with a very ethnic last name in Mazur that's 5 letters, nobody knows how to. Is it Mazur, Mazur? What is it?
Yeah.
Whatever. It's close enough. It doesn't matter to me at
Super.
this point. But I appreciate you coming on the podcast with Tony Mazur. I am Tony Mazur. Thank you so much, Claude. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the podcast. And I'll be back with you another free episode of the Check Your Brain podcast coming up for you next week. If you want more from me, go to Patreon at patreon.com/Tony Mazur. Subscribe today if you so choose. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. And again, I'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.